Hello, and welcome to the New Mexico Workforce Connection Virtual Services. This workshop will focus on how to be successful in a telephone or online interviewing with all the rest of what you need to know to be successful for an interview in any format. There's going to be a lot of information in this workshop, so feel free to take notes, but if you don't have a pen and paper handy, no worries. We plan to send a link to this PowerPoint presentation to the email that you registered with. We will have a recorded version of this presentation available on the Eastern Area Workforce Connection YouTube channel. And finally, on the last slide of this workshop, the email addresses for all 7 of our Workforce Connection offices will be there so you can connect with a career coach to follow up. Career coaches can help review your resume, set up a mock interview, and if the job you're applying for is on our website, we can give you a referral so the employer knows that you've been through our program. Also, feel free to type in any questions that you may have throughout the workshop in the chat section, and the host of the presentation will address all your questions at the end. So with all that said, let's get started. The workshop will cover the following topics: the importance of the job interview, the types of interviews and what to expect, how to prepare and practice for the interview, what should happen during the actual job interview, the follow-up and how to keep the process alive, and finally, we'll start working on answers to commonly asked questions. The job interview is important because the decision changes your life. Maybe not drastically, but a new boss, new coworkers, there's a lot to learn, there's a different environment and culture. So the decision should be made carefully, with careful deliberation, weighing out the pros and cons to make sure that you're a right fit for the job. So there are 2 things going on during an interview. First, you're doing your very best to convey to the employer that you are the right person for that job, but also you need to make sure that the job is right for you. Can you do the job? Is this a good fit for you and the company? And is there opportunity for growth? All of these things are being considered and decided on during the interview. 60% of hiring managers and recruiters are using video interviews during the hiring process. And I'm sure that number has gone up during this time, especially given our current national climate. Resume Go survey said that many, actually most employers are using Zoom. Some are using Skype, Google Meet, Hangouts, or even Microsoft Teams have been utilized. So with the increase in video interviewing, there are some differences, and here are the main ones. What you control in terms of the environment. You control the room that you're in, the noise level, the lighting. Typically, the environment is completely controlled by the employer, but that's something that's very different during virtual interviews. The biggest change is using technology and practicing that technology so you are efficient during the interview process. Especially if you are kind of a novice computer user, if you're not super comfortable, it will take a lot of practice before the actual interview day to make sure that you're comfortable with all that technology. And there are going to be some differences in body language, such as making eye contact, or, when you walk into the interview and give that nice firm handshake, that's not really something that you're going to be able to do. It's still very important, but there are a little bit of differences there. So what's the same? Nearly everything else is the same. And so preparation, practice, appearance, body language, and voice tone, those are all just as important as a face-to-face interview as they are in a virtual interview. Surveyed companies report that most of the interviews have lasted under an hour. Typically, the interviews will last between 30 minutes to an hour. 48% of our employers are reporting that. 36% of employers are reporting that they're lasting under 30 minutes, and a very few, 16%, are reporting that interviews are lasting over an hour. So the interview process. It may start earlier than you think. Typically, that first call that employers are going to make to schedule your interview is going to say a lot about you, especially when they can't see you face to face. They're going to be picking up on a lot of these things. So if your voice message is snarky or it tries to be funny and your friends don't think it is, you might want to take that hint. If you answer the phone with the TV blasting in the background or you're chewing gum, all of these things are turn off to your potential employers, and you want to make sure that they don't happen. So it's down to those details. You must be more aware of how telephone calls may be that very first step. And then there might be a first email with a chance to promote yourself with the interest in the company. And all of this has happened before the scheduled interview. So we're trying to let you know all of this, not just as a potential interviewee, but how to prepare as a job seeker in general. So a few tips off the top of my head for you to be more successful. Your voicemail message on your cell phone should be professional and short. Don't answer the phone unless you're in an environment where you can start taking notes, it's quiet, and you can give them all your attention. If you do happen to answer the phone and you're caught off guard, it is A-okay to let them know that you are not in a place to take any notes right now, but take down the name and number of the person calling and then call them back as soon as you can. And if you do let them go to voicemail, which I highly recommend if you're not in the position to answer the phone, don't let those voice messages pile up. If you're lucky, they may call you more than once, but typically they try to reach out one time, so make sure you call them back quickly. Interviewing methods and formats differ greatly depending on the industry, the company, and even the position within the company that you're applying for. The interviewers may be focusing on one style, or they'll engage you in a combination of several different types. The best thing you can do to prepare is to understand each kind and what its purpose is and your role within that interview. So some of the interviewing formats are screening interviews, one-on-one interviews, group interviews, and all of these can be done over the telephone, via video conference or meeting, or some employers will give you written questions or tests before, during, or after the interview. Some of those tests include honesty and integrity questions on the job application, communication skills tests, or personality tests. Employers use their own combination of all of these methods. The screening interview, the purpose of that is to reduce the applicant pool. So they may do this over the phone or via email. They don't want to interview 15 people when they can reduce it down to 5 during that screening process. This is to give the employer the first impression, to verify your qualifications, your education, and to determine the next step, which would be an actual interview. So what is your role? Your role is to control when and where you answer your phone. Make sure you have the appropriate voice message if you can't answer your phone at that time. Monitor your environment. When you do take the caller, you call them back. Make sure you keep your employment history details nearby. When you get that initial call, sometimes it's nerve-wracking and you know the answers to the questions, but sometimes, poof, they're gone from your brain. So if you have them there in your notes, that's definitely going to help you. Be prepared for common questions and convey a positive attitude and energy in your voice and responses. And at the end of that conversation, even if you think you have all the information, make sure you verify the contact information of the employer and who's going to be interviewing you, so you have a way to contact them. One-on-one interviews are one type of interview that could happen. They do this to assess your traits, to discuss your qualifications. Sometimes they ask to see your skills in action. I know that if you're interviewing, say, for a circuit card repair type position, they could hand you a broken circuit card and tell you to fix it right in front of them. So you want to make sure that whatever you put on your resume, you can actually do. They want to gauge to see whether you're a fit for the company culture. And for this type of interview, it is also your opportunity to learn more about the position in the company. And like all of the other interview types, they want to determine the next step in the hiring process. So your role in a one-on-one interview is to dress appropriately, behave professionally, and convey that positive attitude. You want to have thoughtful and knowledgeable answers to the questions that they ask you, and you also want to show up with questions to ask them based on your careful preparation. You want to provide your employment history and your details. You want to highlight your skills, your education, and your accomplishments. And you also want to convey your strong qualifications and interest in that position through your voice, your body language, and your responses. And you're going to hear me say that a lot. Voice, body language, and responses throughout this entire workshop. They are so key to having a successful interview. Now, group interviewing is another way that is being more widely used, in part because it saves companies time and it allows several people to compare notes immediately after a session while their impression of you is fresh. Typically, some members of the interview would be peers, some would be supervisors, and depending on the position that you're applying for, maybe some top-tier management. This format allows the applicant to interact with members of his or her prospective team, and more importantly, it gives the organization multiple perspectives on the job seeker. Your role in a group interview is to have, or you should do an individual introduction so you understand everybody's name, position, and title. You want to talk to and make contact with multiple individuals. Don't just zero in on one person. One, that's creepy, and two, it does show them that you're interested in everybody in that group and in the conversation. And you want to tailor your answers and questions to be different based on the individual's role and title. And again, you want to convey your qualifications and interest with positive voice tone, body language, and all of your responses. So failure to prepare is preparing to fail. In other words, it's hard to succeed if you don't prepare. You want to research the company and the position. And 99% of the time, they're going to ask you, why do you want to be a part of this company? And you want to have a good response. You want to get the details on who will be conducting the interview and what type of interview it's going to be. Make sure you get all of that information over the phone in the screening process. You want to anticipate some questions and prepare and rehearse responses, and we'll go over some commonly asked questions towards the end of this workshop. You want to develop a list of questions to ask about the job and the company, etc. Again, we'll go over that a little later on in the workshop. You want to provide details to your references. So if you think the interview goes well, you want to call your own references and let them know that they may be getting a call from your potential future employer. And you want to brush up on the elements of professional interviewing style, including your appearance, your body language, and your tone of voice. Now, knowing details about the company before you even apply is important to know whether or not you even want to work for that company, but it's even more important before the interview. So you can do research on the internet, the Chamber of Commerce. You can look them up in industry trade magazines and business publications. You can also go to their website or their social media pages, and a lot of the time it's going to show the type of community involvement that they're in. It'll highlight the awards that they've won, and it'll go into their history or recent news about that company. And of course, if you're applying to the company, you definitely want to know what products and services they provide and what type of industry or market that they're targeting. Take notes. That's incredibly important as well. It is totally okay for you to go into any interview with a small folder, if you're doing it virtually, to have your notes off to the side of your computer and refer to those notes. It's going to show them that you've done your due diligence and you've researched the company, and you'll be able to answer one of the most common questions. And this question really trips up a lot of people. What do you know about our company? Or what is it about our company that makes you want to work for us? You'll have your notes there ready, so you have a really good answer to that question. So these are your must-have interview details. So when you get that initial call, sometimes it'll be from an HR representative, sometimes it'll be from the interviewer themselves, and a lot of times it could be from their secretary. So you want to make sure you get the date and time of the interview and ask about how long the interview should last. That will give you a time to gauge to make sure that your environment is ready for you to do that interview. Make sure you know what type of interview it is, whether it's one-on-one, a group format, and which platform they're going to be using. Are they going to be using Zoom, Google Hangouts, Skype? You want to make sure you have all that information. And make sure you're getting the interviewer or the interviewers, depending on the type of interview, all their contact information, their first and last name, and their title. That way you are already going into the interview knowing who you're going to be talking to. And as silly as this sounds, you want to make sure you know the job title and the duties of the job that you are applying for. So as you can see, I could barely have gotten a word in with the dog barking and the baby crying in the background. And as annoying as that was to you, it's going to be just as annoying to an employer. So you want to make sure that your environment is ready to go for an interview. You want to eliminate distractions. You want to be in a quiet room with the door closed. You want to make sure all noises are like down to a minimum. Don't have an open window. You never know if your neighbor's going to start up the lawnmower. You want to make sure you have your dog in the other room. Maybe have a babysitter for the day if you have kids. And if you do have any of those issues, make the interviewer aware of that. Let them know, hey, I do have a dog and he's in the other room. If somebody walks past the window, he might get excited and start barking. Let them know and be upfront. You also want to pay attention to your lighting. Natural light is best. Your interviewer wants to be able to see your body language and your facial expressions during your interview. So choose a room with good lighting where you don't sit with a window behind you or the lights behind you, because that can often make it look like you are a silhouette. You also want to choose and create the right location. I would highly recommend that you do not do an interview in your bedroom. It's not professional to show your bed in the back or your dirty clothes hamper. Try to make a home office, or if you can, put your cell phone or your computer up against a pretty neutral wall. That way they don't see too much of your personal belongings in the background. And you also don't want to sit too close or too far from the screen. You want it to be great, and the lighting, as you can see with the guy on our bottom right here, his lighting is behind him and you can't really see his facial expressions. He looks really washed out. So you want to make sure to convey the most professional image that you can. And if you can, headphones or earbuds are really good because they can help reduce the distractions for you. But if there is a lag and sometimes the computer can get echoey, that'll help do that, eliminate those noises for you as well and help you be a little more successful. Now, technology. Practice using the technology with a family or friend and record it to review later. It can show your lighting, so try to do your practice interview around the same time that you're going to be doing your real interview. It can watching it back will help you see your facial expressions, if you're fidgeting, if you're touching your face, if you're messing with your hair, or if you're doing anything that's just distracting. I do recommend that you use a laptop or a desktop if you have it. If you don't and you need to use a cell phone, prop it up or put it somewhere stable, because you're not doing your audition for the Blair Witch Project. You know, you're applying for a professional position, so they definitely want to be able to see your face. Make sure you're in a location with a strong internet signal, and test all of those out beforehand. Make sure you do test runs so it's not super laggy. And like I said, download and practice using Zoom, Google Hangouts, whatever platform they're going to use, and do those mock interviews with your family and friends. Or like I stated before, call one of our Workforce Connection offices and you can do a virtual interview and you can record it and you'll be able to see all of your facial expressions, your body language, and anything you may want to eliminate during your actual interview. So now the interview is here. Today's the day you're going to have your interview. And if you take nothing else from this workshop, I hope you leave with this. Wear pants. It sounds silly. You could be dressed from the waist up, but there's a psychological impact of dressing for success. If you dress for success from head to toe, it's going to put you in the place where you're not so much relaxing in your home, but you're in a professional interview. So remind your household, if you have anybody else in the house during the interview, that when, where, and right before, like, hey, my interview's about to start, everybody please be quiet. Make sure you use full screen for your Zoom so you can see everybody as best as you can. Most of the platforms will have you enter your name. You don't want to put a nickname or something silly. You want to just be professional and put your first and last name. If there are any technology issues, and especially if they cause you to be late, apologize and briefly explain what's going on. That's going to show that you're not afraid to speak up or address issues, and make sure you let them know what's going on. And if the audio stops working at any point, always utilize the chat feature. So starting with a digital handshake. So a digital handshake is simple. You simply look into the computer, right into the camera. You don't want to look down or at the screen and the people, because it does make it look like you're looking down. You want to look directly into the camera to forge that connection. Do a small head nod as if to say yes, add a smile, and that translates warmth and openness, and say hello. That's a nice way to do a digital handshake. And it's okay to mention in the moment that interviewing isn't the same as an in-person interview. Acknowledging things that are different helps put people at ease, and it mimics those introductory moments. So it's hard to come in and shake your hand, and you can say something like, I wish I could give you a nice firm handshake, but it's really great to meet you. And another really important thing on the day of your interview is to not interrupt. And that is something that you'll have to make sure you wait for the pauses before you start speaking, because it is very easy for people to talk over each other in a digital environment like that. So now what would you do if things go wrong? And I'm not trying to scare you, but honestly, sometimes things go wrong. So apologize briefly and explain the technology issue, especially if it causes you to be late. And in order to avoid being late, it is so important to set alarm clocks, to make sure you know what time, and to sign in early. A lot of the times you can be left in like a waiting room, or it'll say waiting for the host to start the meeting. It's much better for you to be waiting there for them to come on than for them to be waiting for you. And so, like I said before, if something does go wrong, don't be afraid to speak up. This shows that you're straightforward and you're willing to work on issues. And always use that chat feature if something happens with your audio. And now let's say something does happen. Somebody enters the room unexpectedly, the dog starts barking in the other room. Let them know, say, excuse me for just a moment, turn off the audio, turn off the video, handle your business quickly, and come back and unmute and apologize and let them know, hey, sometimes life happens and I apologize, and fix it quickly. So the elements of a professional interview style. So you've heard me say this several times already. Appearance, body language, and tone of voice. Those convey more than just what the sentence that you said. You're going to get a lot more from the appearance, body language, and the tone of your voice. Additionally, good listening skills are incredibly important in an interview, and we'll definitely go over those in just a bit. So now your appearance. The first impression, you're being judged on your overall appearance and what you do during the first 30 seconds. So like we spoke about, that digital handshake, smile, give the nod, it'll show warmth and openness. Don't have a straight stone face. Make sure you're very open and willing. Most employers prefer that candidates wear business casual during the interview. Not all of them care, but my rule of thumb is always wear what you would wear for one position above what you're hiring for. So, or what you're applying for, excuse me. So if you are applying to be an automotive mechanic, you probably don't want to wear greasy clothes, but you also don't want to wear a three-piece suit. That would be inappropriate for that type of interview. So 44% of employers say it doesn't really matter what they wear. 52% of employers would prefer business casual, and only 4% would prefer business formal or professional. If you're applying for a CEO position, you definitely don't want to be business casual. You would like to be business formal. But best rule of thumb, business casual is usually great. Avoid wearing tight-fitting or revealing clothing. Bold colors or prints, you kind of want to have a neutral-looking attire. Hats really shouldn't be worn. Any clanky or clunky jewelry that could be distracting is not advisable. If you do have any visible body piercings or tattoos, that's totally fine, but it is probably in your best interest to cover them up during the interview process. Also, wild nail polish covers are frowned upon, and you definitely don't want to be drinking or eating, or especially chewing gum during an interview. It's just very, very distracting. So before the interview, you want to stand in front of the mirror and make all of your final adjustments, straightening, tucking, arranging, and make sure you're ready to go. Now, body language is the most important factor when determining the meaning of what is being said. So if I'm fully trying to understand you and comprehend what you are trying to communicate to me, research says that I value your words to communicate for 7% of the meaning, your voice to express 38% of your meaning, and your body language communicates 55% of that meaning. So half of, or more than half, nearly 100% of what you're saying is not in your words, but in your tone of voice and in your body language. So it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. And so you want to communicate professionalism both verbally and non-verbally. Practice that direct eye contact and have a confident hello at the beginning. Again, practice looking straight into the camera and not down, looking at yourself. You want to sit up straight, definitely no slouching. And you want to lean forward for emphasis, but don't ever fold your arms across your chest. That really closes you off and makes the person think that you're closed off to what they're saying. Again, make regular eye contact into the camera. Don't look at yourself, and always be smiling. And you can occasionally nod in agreement so they can see that your body language is receptive to what they're saying. And you also want to close the interview with direct eye contact and a confident thank you at the end. So now looking at this body language, we can see all these 9 individuals. Number 1, he looks ready for an interview. He looks confident. He looks ready to go. Number 2, she looks a little unsure. Her hands are on her face. She's looking away from the camera. Number 3, well, his lighting is poor. He is dressed well, but he doesn't look very confident. Number 4 should probably be napping and not in an interview. And number 5, and I'm sure it's the arms across the chest that we're trying to emphasize, but you want to make sure that your face is in the frame. And number 6 here, that's probably what you shouldn't look like at all during your interview. He's clearly not dressed professionally. His whole face doesn't even look like he wants to be a part of that interview. Our guy over here, number 7, he does look a little smug. You want to be welcoming and open with a nice professional smile. And number 8, she looks totally fine, but this is something that you're going to want to watch for yourself when you record your practice interview. Make sure you look at all of your facial expressions. If you have any weird tics that you want to try to get under control before you have your face just on that screen. And number 9, that's definitely not how you want to do an interview. So it does look like she's holding a phone and maybe a tablet. If she's holding a tablet down there, you definitely want to make sure it's in front of your face so they're not interviewing up your nose. They're actually looking at your face and all of your professional body language. So now here are some good tips on how to be a great active listener. You don't want to interrupt. Make sure, especially if you are in a group interview, you make sure everybody finishes their sentence, their thought, before you start to say yours. And acknowledge the speaker. Make sure you acknowledge them, and you can always repeat back what they say to you. So you can say, oh, so I'm understanding what you're saying as this, and repeat back to them in your own words what you think it is that they're saying or meaning. Look interested, but don't only look interested, actually be interested. And if you're really not interested during that interview, that might be a good indicator that that job isn't right for you. And it is a-okay to take notes. I highly encourage it, but make sure before you start taking notes, you ask the interviewer if they're comfortable with you taking notes during the interview process. Always keep an open mind. And this one is especially important. Don't get lost in your own thoughts. Especially because you're going to be in your own home, in your own environment, and in your own comfort. You don't want to start thinking about your grocery list or what time you need to take your kid to the doctor. You want to be 100% focused on the interview in that moment. Again, wait for pauses to ask questions. You don't want to interrupt. And look for their body language, but don't jump to conclusions. Make sure you keep an open mind and you keep the communication flowing. Now, in closing the interview, you can simply tell the interviewer that you really want that job. You want to make sure that they know that that's what you want. You can summarize why you're the best candidate for that position, because they're probably going to be interviewing several others other than you, and you want to make sure you stand out and let them know why you're the best. You want to ask if there's anything else that you can provide, like your references, any work samples. All of those things can be taken with you to the face-to-face interview or stay with you during the digital interview, and you can send it to them via email or put it in the chat function, whatever you need. And always ask about the next steps in the hiring process, how those are going to go, when do you need to contact them, and who do you need to contact. And that shows them that you have all of the interest in that position. And you always want to leave every interview thanking them for their time, because employers' time is valuable and they're taking time out of their day to interview you. So thank them for that. Give them the direct eye contact, and imagine you're doing that firm handshake, that digital handshake, confident into the camera. Tell them thank you with a nice warm smile, and you can end the interview that way. So now follow-up. In my opinion, after everything in the interview, this is probably the most important step. So they may tell you that the hiring decision will be made quickly, so you'll want to follow up with an email. Sometimes you can write a handwritten note, but nowadays an email is more than sufficient. And you definitely want to send that thank you within 24 hours. So right after the interview, you want to think about how the interview went and how you answered any of the questions. And if there was one that you didn't know the answer to, that's okay. In your thank you email, you can let them know upon review and upon thinking about the question that you asked and lay out the question, the answer that I came up with, and type the answer out in your email. And so it's okay. And that shows them that you've thought about it, that you were willing enough to go back home, type up or research the answer, type it up and send it to them. Most people do not send a thank you after their interview. So don't just sit back and wait. Being proactive and following up gives you an edge up on the competition. It will keep you fresh in their mind and remind them how much you want that position. So again, in the follow-up, you want to alert your references. So we talked about that earlier, but you want to call your references to let them know, hey, I think my interview went really well. Please expect a call from my potential future employer, and make sure you want them to talk you up and give them the best and give you the best reference possible. So interviews are inherently anxiety inducing. It's really difficult to sit in front of somebody, to stand in front of somebody, to sit in front of a computer and talk about yourself and sell yourself. So to reduce the anxiety of that interview, to prepare and practice is super crucial. So we've already mentioned it. Practice the interview in front of a mirror, practice the interview in front of the Zoom camera, so you can see and feel confident when they're asking you those questions, you have really good answers. Make sure you get plenty of sleep the night before. And before you get on the actual Zoom, the meeting, the virtual interview, do some deep breaths. Deep breathing really helps calm the mind. And be your own cheerleader. Mental coaching and cheerleading for yourself, hyping yourself up, telling yourself you're going to kill this interview, you're the best one for the job, and they're going to hire you. Put that out there, put it into the universe, because I guarantee you that you are going to do great. You're going to do wonderful, and you just have to tell yourself that. Positive thoughts before the interview. And if there's a checklist that the employer requested, make sure that is completed. Otherwise, you are going to have a lot more anxiety. And always be right on time. So like we've said many, many times, use the technology, practice with the technology. And it's always better for you to be in the waiting room waiting on the employer than for the employer to be waiting on you. So now we'll go over some common interview questions. So a lot of these you'll be asked during the interview process. Nearly 100% of the time, the first question that they'll ask you is, tell me about yourself. Now, you may want to start talking about your personal life. Well, my name is such and such. I have so many kids. I'm married. My hobbies include. To be honest, employers really don't care about your personal life in the interview process. You want to tell about your professional self, about your skills, your accomplishments, your education, your experience. That's what they're wanting to hear. They'll also ask you about your greatest strengths and weaknesses. Make sure you have 3 of each before you go into the interview. Tell me about an accomplishment that you're proud of. Have that rehearsed and ready to go before you go in. So an accomplishment you're proud of, you were able to, complete a project before the deadline, saving the company X amount of dollars. You want to give all of those quantitative and qualitative information in the presentation of that answer. How would your supervisors and coworkers describe you? This is one that you can actually ask your supervisor or ask your coworkers before you go into your interview, and you can tell the potential new employer what they said about you. Other ones, why do you want this job? Why should we hire you? How can you make a contribution to our company? All of those are other ones where you can talk about yourself and what you want to do in the company. This last one here, number 10, why did you leave your last job? I think it's very important to highlight that you should never, never badmouth a previous employer during your interview. If you left your last job because your boss was a jerk, your coworkers sucked, and the whole environment was trash, well, that's okay, but you definitely don't want to say that to your new potential employer. To avoid those kind of things, you can say that you feel like you've reached your potential at your current place of employment, and you're looking for a new challenge, and you're looking for something to better yourself as an individual. Never, never badmouth a previous employer or previous coworkers. That's going to look terrible for you during an interview. And finally, the last question that they will always ask you 100% of the time is, do you have any questions for us? Never, never, never say no. The interviewers want somebody who's interested and engaged. So before the interview, prepare a couple of really good questions to ask them at the end of the interview. A really good question to ask is, what does success looks like in this role? A lot of candidates, a lot of interviewees handle this question very poorly. A lot of the times they'll just say no and walk out. They really want somebody who is interested and has done their research and is asking good questions about the company. So some good questions to ask. Oh, excuse me. Some good questions to ask are thoughtful and well-researched questions that can demonstrate your interest, initiative, and understanding of the position in the company. You want to prepare at least 3. It's better to have maybe 4 or 5 because during the interview, they may answer some of the questions that you have to ask them. Ask about training, the company's future, what working on a team within that company looks like, some of the different department and organizations. Ask about the hiring process and the next steps in that hiring process. But you also want to make sure you don't ask a question about something you should already know because that does make you look a little silly. Some good questions to ask are what kind of opportunities are there for training and career advancement? Or how would you rank the 2 to 3 most important qualities required for success in this job and at this company? Maybe another one could be, what do you see for long-term growth of the company? Or one here is, what else is required to convince you that I'm the best candidate for this position? That's letting them know that you are so interested that you are willing to give them any and all information needed to get that job. You got a sneak peek at this a little earlier. Some of these are behavioral questions and hypothetical situations that a potential employer could ask you. Take a look at these and think about what your responses to them would be. And every person in this workshop, it's going to be different for everyone. What would you do if a boss asked you to do something against the rules? So think about, how would you handle that conflict? How would you approach your boss and letting them know that it's against the rules? What would you do in that scenario? Something else that they could ask you, given an example of an unsuccessful project you were responsible for. That one is a really difficult one to answer because you're putting it out there that you have made mistakes in the past or you have failed an assignment. But what you want to do is you want to describe your role, what happened, and most importantly, what you learned from that experience. Like with your weaknesses, you want to tell them, hey, I'm not so great at X, Y, and Z, but here's what I'm doing to make myself better in those weak areas. This is the same kind of thing you want to do in that scenario. You want to explain situations and how you got things done. Like in a question, tell me about a time when you had many projects with varying deadlines. That's how you can show your time management skills, how you're timely, what you do to reduce the anxiety of getting all of those projects done. And another one that they could ask is, give an example of a project or activity that required strong leadership and team skills. So again, put yourself in those situations. Think about all of these things because a lot of employers will ask you questions either verbatim or very, very similar to these. So again, thank you so much for joining us for this workshop. You can email career coaches at your local Workforce Connection office for more information on interviewing or any other questions that you may have about your job search. We're definitely here to help. So here's the slide I promised that would be up. These are our 7 different offices. We have an office in Alamogordo, Artesia, Carlsbad, Clovis, Hobbs, Roswell, and Ruidoso. And here at the bottom, you can see that our YouTube channel for all of our workshops is the New Mexico Workforce Connection East region. So again, thank you so much for joining us today, and I wish you the best of luck in all of your future interviews.